Good evening. This is News Up bringing you the latest developments just minutes ago from across Britain, where unrest has erupted in unprecedented intensity following an attempted intervention by the royal household to calm escalating tensions. Reports indicate that what began as isolated demonstrations in several major cities have rapidly spiraled into widespread clashes between protesters and law enforcement, marking one of the most significant periods of civil disturbance in recent memory. Eyewitnesses described chaotic scenes on the streets of London, Manchester, Birmingham, and Glasgow, where hundreds, possibly thousands, of individuals have gathered, with confrontations quickly turning volatile. Security forces, including riot police units and specialized public order divisions, have been deployed in full readiness, facing the highly charged and increasingly unpredictable populace. The unrest, fueled by deep-seated socio-political grievances, economic pressures, and widespread dissatisfaction with governmental policies, has now gained an additional layer of complexity following what is described by sources within Buckingham Palace as a failed effort by senior members of the royal family to engage directly with community leaders and representatives of civil society. This latest intervention, intended to serve as a symbolic bridge of authority and reassurance, appears to have instead triggered intensified reactions as demonstrators expressed anger over perceived detachment from public concerns and a disconnect between official statements and on-the-ground realities. Initial reports suggest that tensions escalated immediately after televised statements issued earlier this morning by members of the royal household, who urged calm and emphasized the importance of constructive dialogue. Rather than pacifying crowds, these communications appear to have been met with skepticism and in some cases outright hostility, with demonstrators accusing the monarchy of being out of touch and failing to address the root causes of the widespread public anger. On social media platforms, live footage has captured scenes of chaos, with demonstrators chanting slogans demanding accountability, greater transparency in governance, and urgent action on issues ranging from economic inequality to public service reforms. Some analysts suggest that the royal intervention, rather than providing a stabilizing influence, inadvertently served as a catalyst for collective action, particularly among younger demographics who are highly active on digital channels and adept at mobilizing rapid, large-scale responses. This development has prompted law enforcement to reassess their approach, balancing the need to maintain public safety with the risk of inflaming tensions further. Sources within the Metropolitan Police and other regional constabularies report that resources are being stretched thin as units are redeployed to hotspot areas, with an emphasis on containing flashpoints and preventing potential escalation into property damage, violent clashes, and injuries. As the situation unfolds, experts in political science and civil unrest caution that Britain may be entering a prolonged period of instability, highlighting that the interaction between symbolic authority figures, such as the monarchy, and public sentiment can have unpredictable consequences, particularly in a climate of widespread social discontent. The broader context, including ongoing debates over economic austerity, housing crisis, healthcare challenges, and regional disparities, underscores the complexity of the unrest and the difficulty of achieving immediate resolution. Observers note that while the royal intervention was intended to demonstrate empathy and national cohesion, it may have been perceived as performative or insufficiently responsive to the pressing demands voiced by the public. Consequently, streets across multiple urban centers are witnessing sustained demonstrations, with hundreds of arrests reported and local authorities grappling with significant logistical challenges. Emergency services, including fire, medical, and transport agencies, are coordinating with law enforcement to mitigate risks, manage crowd movement, and ensure rapid response to incidents. Meanwhile, political figures from multiple parties are issuing statements urging calm and responsible conduct, yet many citizens remain unconvinced, pointing to structural issues that they argue require far-reaching reform rather than short-term symbolic gestures. Adding to the tension, intelligence briefings suggest that some factions within the demonstrator groups are deliberately seeking to provoke confrontation with authorities, leveraging both traditional protest methods and emerging digital coordination techniques. Video footage and eyewitness accounts indicate that in certain locations, makeshift barricades have been erected, traffic disrupted, and localized skirmishes with police occurring, In parallel, widespread coverage on social media platforms has created a feedback loop, where incidents are rapidly disseminated, often amplifying both misinformation and emotional response. Authorities are cautioning that the fluid nature of the unrest makes real-time reporting essential, emphasizing that the situation is evolving by the hour and could shift rapidly depending on crowd behavior, weather conditions, and additional interventions by civic or political actors. Observers highlight that this wave of unrest is not merely a spontaneous reaction, but rather the result of accumulating frustrations across multiple societal layers, compounded by the perception that traditional mechanisms of dialogue and redress have proven inadequate. In conclusion, as Britain grapples with this unprecedented flare-up of public unrest, the failure of the royal intervention underscores the delicate balance between symbolic gestures of authority and the tangible demands of a populace experiencing sustained economic, social, and political pressures. While the full ramifications of today's events remain to be seen, early indications suggest that a combination of strategic law enforcement response, political engagement, and community-level dialogue will be critical in preventing further escalation. Citizens are advised to exercise caution, follow official guidance, and monitor reliable news sources as authorities continue to navigate this rapidly evolving situation. This is a defining moment in contemporary British public life, one that may shape both the role of national institutions and the trajectory of civic engagement in the months to come. Turning now to the specific developments across Britain's major urban centers, the scale and intensity of the unrest vary from city to city, yet a common thread of frustration and anger is evident everywhere. In London, the capital, the epicenter of the demonstrations, streets around Westminster, Trafalgar Square, and the South Bank have become a focal point for large, sometimes unruly crowds. Reports from multiple sources suggest that tens of thousands of people have gathered, some marching peacefully while others have engaged in direct confrontations with the police. Eyewitnesses describe dramatic scenes of protesters attempting to breach barricades near government buildings, with riot police forming cordons and employing standard crowd control measures including shields, batons, and in certain instances, mounted units. Tear gas and water cannons have reportedly been used selectively to disperse concentrated clusters of demonstrators. Yet tensions remain high as citizens chant slogans demanding accountability, transparency, and urgent action on issues ranging from cost of living pressures to perceived systemic inequalities. The presence of media crews, both domestic and international, has magnified the impact of these events, with live broadcasts capturing not only the confrontations but also human stories of families, activists, and first-time demonstrators caught up in the unfolding chaos. Meanwhile, in Manchester, another historic hub of industrial and cultural significance, the unrest has taken on a different texture. Crowds have converged on Deansgate, Piccadilly Gardens, and the city's central business district, where the mix of students, young professionals, and long-standing residents reflects a broad cross-section of society. Reports indicate sporadic property damage, including overturned bins, graffiti on public and private buildings, and temporary road blockages, while police have adopted a more mobile response strategy, focusing on dispersing small clusters before they can coalesce into larger, potentially more dangerous groups. Local authorities have issued warnings advising residents to avoid central areas, with public transport hubs experiencing delays and temporary closures due to safety concerns. Interviews with demonstrators reveal that while many are motivated by economic grievances such as inflation, housing shortages, and employment insecurity, others are expressing wider frustration with political institutions and the perceived inability of national leadership to engage meaningfully with ordinary citizens. In addition, Manchester's civic leaders have called for calm, emphasizing dialogue and mutual respect, though the rapid pace and unpredictable nature of the demonstrations make enforcement and mediation a delicate task. In Birmingham, known for its diverse population and historical role in labor movements, unrest has been concentrated around the city center and key transport arteries. Eyewitnesses report a significant presence of young adults, many using digital coordination tools to organize meetups, share live updates, and identify areas of heightened police activity. The protests have resulted in traffic disruptions, temporary shop closures, and localized skirmishes, with authorities deploying specialized units trained in public order management. Local hospitals have reported minor injuries among both demonstrators and police personnel, highlighting the physical risks inherent in such densely populated gatherings. Furthermore, analysts note that Birmingham's unrest is not just a product of spontaneous public anger but is deeply intertwined with long-standing social and economic disparities, including limited access to affordable housing, educational inequality, and employment challenges in post-industrial sectors. Community leaders are attempting to mediate by establishing dialogue hubs and encouraging constructive protest. Yet the scale of participation and the intensity of emotions pose ongoing challenges to both law enforcement and local governance. Moving north to Glasgow, Scotland's largest city, the situation is similarly intense, but layered with regional political dimensions. Demonstrations have centered around George Square and Buchanan Street, with crowds expressing both national and local grievances. Police Scotland has activated a comprehensive response plan, deploying officers across multiple districts and employing crowd containment strategies, while emphasizing restraint and the minimization of escalation. Observers note that the Scottish context introduces additional complexity, with some demonstrators linking broader discontent to debates over independence, regional funding, and perceived neglect by Westminster. Eyewitnesses describe a highly charged atmosphere, with demonstrators carrying banners and placards highlighting economic inequality, public service cuts, and environmental concerns. In response, civic authorities have urged calm and compliance with public order regulations, while community organizations have mobilized volunteers to provide first aid, water, and legal advice to those involved. The interplay between local politics and nationwide unrest underscores the multidimensional nature of these events, highlighting that while there are shared grievances across Britain, regional histories, identities, and political contexts significantly shape both the behavior of demonstrators and the response of authorities. In other cities, including Liverpool, Leeds, Sheffield, and Newcastle, similar patterns are emerging, albeit on a smaller scale. In Liverpool, crowds have gathered around the pierhead and central commercial districts, while in Leeds, protesters have taken to city square and major thoroughfares, often disrupting transport and commercial activity. Sheffield has witnessed clashes near university campuses and the city centre, and Newcastle has reported peaceful marches that occasionally escalated into confrontations with police lines. Across these cities, local authorities face challenges in managing urban mobility, ensuring public safety, and mitigating property damage while respecting the right to lawful assembly. Emergency services have been stretched as ambulances, fire units, and law enforcement coordinate closely to respond to incidents, highlighting the systemic strain on civic infrastructure. Across all urban centers, media reports and social media content reflect both the intensity of emotion and the strategic coordination among demonstrators, painting a complex picture of a society grappling with widespread disaffection, structural pressures, and the unexpected consequences of symbolic interventions, including those by the royal family. As Britain grapples with this unprecedented wave of unrest, the response of law enforcement and security agencies has become a central focus, drawing attention both for its scale and for the complex strategies being deployed across multiple cities. In London, the Metropolitan Police, in coordination with the British Transport Police and specialized public order units, has mobilized thousands of officers, utilizing the combination of traditional crowd control measures and advanced surveillance technologies to monitor developments in real time. Well-trained personnel, mounted units, and tactical teams have been strategically positioned around key government buildings, transport hubs, and historically sensitive areas, such as Parliament Square, Whitehall, and the South Bank, where demonstrator activity has been most concentrated. These forces are not merely reacting to immediate disturbances, they are attempting to anticipate crowd movement, identify potential flashpoints, and prevent escalation that could lead to serious injury, property damage, or wider civil disruption. Communication lines between Central Command and officers on the ground have been intensified, with live feeds from aerial drones, body-worn cameras, and CATS networks providing an integrated picture of unfolding events. Authorities are also employing mobile command centers, enabling real-time analysis, rapid deployment of resources, and strategic adjustments in response to shifting crowd dynamics. In addition to traditional policing, London's law enforcement agencies are increasingly relying on intelligence-led operations to manage the unrest. This includes monitoring digital platforms, where organizers communicate using both open-source intelligence and controlled interventions to anticipate the formation of large assemblies or coordinate actions designed to circumvent police presence. Analysts note that while this approach is intended to prevent disorder, it carries inherent risks, particularly when demonstrators perceive surveillance as intrusive or authoritarian, potentially heightening tensions. Officers on the ground report a mixture of compliance and defiance, with some demonstrators responding to instructions to disperse, while others actively challenge police authority. In response, law enforcement has emphasized proportionality, using non-lethal measures where necessary, such as containment lines, shields, and water cannons, while reserving force escalation for situations deemed immediately threatening to life or public safety. The deployment of these measures has been accompanied by rigorous adherence to legal frameworks governing the use of force, assembly, and public order management, reflecting the careful balance authorities are attempting to maintain between upholding the law and protecting civil liberties. Beyond the capital, regional forces have similarly escalated their operations, deploying specialized units trained in crowd control, negotiation, and rapid response. In Manchester, West Midlands, Birmingham, and Glasgow, police have implemented a combination of visible and covert strategies. Officers in uniform were supplemented by plainclothes personnel embedded within protest groups tasked with monitoring behavior, reporting potential threats, and facilitating early intervention where necessary. Tactical coordination between city centers and surrounding areas is critical, as demonstrations in one location can rapidly inspire mobilization in nearby neighborhoods, requiring adaptive resource allocation and communication across jurisdictions. Emergency planning has been intensified, with command structures ensuring that hospitals, fire services, and transport agencies are prepared to respond to incidents ranging from minor injuries to large-scale emergencies. Authorities are also issuing continuous public advisories, encouraging peaceful assembly while cautioning against unlawful activity, highlighting the dual approach of enforcement combined with public engagement. At a national level, the Home Office has activated contingency planning, consulting with senior police leadership and intelligence agencies to monitor developments across Britain. This includes assessing the risk of escalation into coordinated or premeditated unrest, identifying potential traitors, and preparing to deploy additional resources if local forces become overwhelmed. Political leaders have been in close contact with law enforcement chiefs, ensuring that both public communication and operational strategy are aligned. While the royal intervention earlier today was intended to pacify tensions, the immediate failure of this symbolic effort has necessitated a recalibration of security strategy, with a focus on mitigating the impact of both spontaneous demonstrations and potentially orchestrated disruptions. Analysts suggest that the current situation represents a test of the resilience and adaptability of Britain's public order infrastructure, highlighting the challenges inherent in responding to mass civic unrest in a densely populated, highly connected society. Another critical component of the security response has been the coordination with municipal authorities to manage infrastructure and urban mobility. Roads have been closed temporarily, public transportation rerouted, and high-density areas cordoned off to minimize risks to both demonstrators and bystanders. Emergency medical teams are deployed in anticipation of injuries arising from physical confrontations, environmental hazards, or accidents associated with crowd movement. Hospitals in major cities report activating surge protocols to handle potential influxes of patients, while fire and rescue services monitor risks such as fires, structural damage, and hazardous materials that may result from clashes or vandalism. Local councils are working closely with law enforcement to ensure essential services remain operational, highlighting the integrated approach required in managing complex, multi-dimensional unrest. Public advisories emphasize situational awareness, ordering citizens to follow instructions, avoid congested areas, and report incidents that could threaten safety or property. Finally, analysts and law enforcement experts alike stress that the management of today's unrest is not purely a matter of tactical deployment or reactive measures. Success depends on strategic communication, intelligence sharing, and careful judgment in the use of force. Prolonged unrest presents risks beyond immediate physical danger, including economic disruption, reputational damage, and long-term social consequences. Authorities are balancing these considerations against the constitutional rights of citizens, mindful that excessive or poorly justified interventions could exacerbate tensions or provoke wider national condemnation. The current operation illustrates both the scale and sophistication of Britain's public order response, encompassing traditional policing, intelligence-led strategies, emergency coordination, and real-time adaptation to rapidly evolving circumstances. As the unrest continues to unfold, the eyes of the nation and indeed the world remain fixed on the streets of Britain, where law enforcement is engaged in one of the most challenging and consequential operations in recent memory, navigating the delicate interplay between maintaining public safety, respecting civil liberties, and responding effectively to a populous and open, highly charged dissent. As Britain continues to grapple with unprecedented unrest, the response of the public has been complex, multifaceted, and at times deeply polarized, reflecting a society navigating profound socio-political tensions while attempting to reconcile feelings of frustration, fear, and civic responsibility. Across cities such as London, Manchester, Birmingham, Glasgow, and Liverpool, citizens have taken to both the streets and digital platforms to express opinions, share experiences, and organize collective action. On the ground, eyewitness accounts describe a broad spectrum of participants, from seasoned activists and union representatives to first-time demonstrators, students, and ordinary residents compelled by escalating economic pressures, housing crises, and growing dissatisfaction with political institutions. Interviews conducted with participants highlight the diversity of motivations. Some demonstrators cite rising living costs, stagnating wages, and cuts to essential public services. Others emphasize systemic inequality, perceived governmental indifference, and calls for more meaningful public dialogue. While many assemblies remain largely peaceful, the high density of participants, combined with emotionally charged rhetoric, and the unpredictable impact of symbolic interventions, most notably the recent royal attempt at mediation, has resulted in episodes of confrontation, spread property damage, and the visible deployment of law enforcement to maintain order. Social media platforms have become both a catalyst and a mirror of the unrest, providing real-time documentation of events and facilitating rapid dissemination of information. Platforms such as formerly Twitter, Threads, TikTok, and encrypted messaging services have played a central role in mobilizing demonstrators, sharing live updates, and organizing protests that sometimes emerge with little advance notice. This rapid coordination has challenged authorities' ability to anticipate and respond to gatherings, while also amplifying the emotional intensity of public discourse. Viral videos capturing confrontations with police, acts of civil disobedience, and impassioned speeches have circulated widely, drawing commentary from millions and often creating feedback loops that further inflame tensions. Analysts caution that while social media provides a platform for legitimate civic engagement, it also enables the spread of misinformation, exaggeration, and coordinated provocations, complicating the task of law enforcement and emergency services. In some cases, demonstrators' posts have included detailed instructions on avoiding police checkpoints or navigating city streets to maximize visibility and impact, illustrating the sophistication and strategic awareness of those involved in the protests. Political figures across the spectrum have weighed in, offering statements that range from calls for calm and dialogue to critiques of government policy and law enforcement strategy. Senior members of the government have emphasized that the right to peaceful protest is fundamental to democracy, while also highlighting that unlawful behavior, violence, or property destruction will not be tolerated. Opposition leaders have seized the opportunity to underscore perceived governmental failures, drawing attention to economic policies, social welfare reforms, and public service funding as underlying catalysts for the unrest. The royal household, having recently attempted direct intervention, is now navigating the delicate balance of public perception, emphasizing neutrality, support for civic institutions, and a continued commitment to national unity. Political analysts note that today's events underscore the fragility of public trust and the critical importance of transparent communication, demonstrating that symbolic gestures, while intended to reassure, may be interpreted in ways that are counterproductive if not accompanied by substantive action addressing citizens' concerns. On the streets, the public reaction is equally nuanced. While large segments of demonstrators actively engage in protests, community-driven initiatives have also emerged to mitigate risks and provide support to those affected by the unrest. Volunteer groups distribute water, first aid supplies, and legal guidance, highlighting the social solidarity that often emerges amid turmoil. Residents who are not participating in demonstrations report anxiety and disruption, noting that transport, commerce, and daily routines have been significantly affected, while some express frustration over the timing, scale, and unpredictability of the events. Eyewitness reports describe generational differences in participation and perspective, with younger demographics more likely to engage directly, often using social media to coordinate and amplify their voices, while older citizens may focus on civic dialogue, petitions, or advocacy through established channels. The tension between these approaches reflects broader societal dynamics, including differing expectations of government responsiveness, the role of symbolic institutions, and the mechanisms through which citizens feel empowered to affect change. Media coverage has become a critical lens through which the public interprets and reacts to the unfolding events. Broadcast networks, digital news outlets, and independent journalists provide continuous updates, interviews, and analysis. Yet the sheer volume and immediacy of information can also produce confusion, exaggeration, or conflicting narratives. Commentary by experts in sociology, political science, and public policy emphasizes the structural drivers behind the unrest, highlighting that economic inequality, housing shortages, and regional disparities have created conditions in which symbolic interventions, including those by the monarchy, may have unintended consequences. Civic organizations, trade unions, and advocacy groups are calling for structured dialogue, greater transparency, and proactive solutions, arguing that long-term stability requires addressing the root causes of discontent rather than relying solely on visible but potentially superficial measures. Public sentiment, as reflected through social media metrics, polling, and qualitative interviews, indicates widespread concern, with a mix of empathy for demonstrators' grievances and anxiety over safety, property, and the broader implications of civil disorder. Finally, the interplay between public reaction, media coverage, and political commentary highlights the complex, interconnected ecosystem shaping the current crisis. Citizens, authorities, media organizations, and symbolic institutions are simultaneously influencing and responding to one another, creating a highly dynamic and unpredictable environment. Analysts warn that without strategic engagement, sustained dialogue, and visible action on pressing issues, unrest may persist or even escalate, with potential ripple effects extending beyond immediate urban centers. The situation underscores the challenge of modern governance in an era of rapid communication, social mobilization, and heightened public expectations. As Britain continues to navigate this extraordinary period, understanding the motivations, perceptions, and behaviors of its citizens remains essential for effective policy, responsive law enforcement, and the maintenance of social cohesion, emphasizing that today's unrest is not merely a spontaneous eruption but a symptom of deeper systemic pressures demanding thoughtful, comprehensive, and timely attention. As Britain continues to navigate this extraordinary period of unrest, analysts, policymakers, and observers are now turning their attention to the potential long-term implications of these events for government institutions, the monarchy, and the nation's social and economic trajectory. The immediate failure of the royal intervention, widely reported across both traditional and social media, has highlighted the increasingly complex role of symbolic institutions in modern British society. While the monarchy has historically acted as a stabilizing figurehead, providing continuity and national unity in times of political or social turbulence. Today's events suggest that symbolic authority alone may be insufficient to address deeply rooted grievances. Experts note that the public's perception of institutional legitimacy now rests not only on tradition or ceremonial engagement, but also on visible, substantive action that directly impacts citizens' lives. In practical terms, this means that while the royal household may continue to advocate for dialogue and national cohesion, its influence in quelling unrest is contingent upon broader governmental responsiveness, effective communication strategies, and tangible solutions to socio-economic challenges. The government, for its part, faces significant scrutiny over both its policy choices and its crisis management strategies. Today's unrest has emerged against the backdrop of economic pressures, including high inflation, rising energy costs, and strained public services, creating conditions in which citizens' frustration is not merely anecdotal but structurally rooted. Political analysts suggest that failure to address these structural issues could result in sustained civil unrest, prolonged public dissatisfaction, and declining trust in elected leadership. Furthermore, the intersection of symbolic interventions, such as the royal attempt with formal government communication, highlights the delicate balance required in messaging, policy enforcement, and public reassurance. Observers note that the government must navigate a complex dual mandate, maintaining law and order to ensure public safety while simultaneously addressing the legitimate grievances that underlie the unrest. Missteps in either domain could exacerbate tensions, deepen public cynicism, and potentially influence electoral dynamics, public policy debates, and international perceptions of Britain's social stability. The monarchy, as a symbolic institution, now faces the challenge of reaffirming its relevance in an era of heightened public scrutiny and rapid information dissemination. While members of the royal family have long been expected to act as unifying figures above partisan politics, the immediate public reaction to today's intervention demonstrates that the symbolic power of the crown is no longer guaranteed to command automatic respect or compliance. Analysts suggest that the royal household must consider how to maintain moral authority and public trust in a society where citizens increasingly demand concrete action, transparency, and engagement with pressing social issues. Failure to navigate this delicate balance could impact the monarch's broader public perception, influencing debates on constitutional roles, public funding, and the long-term relevance of hereditary institutions in a democratic, highly connected society. Experts also note that how the monarchy responds in the days and weeks ahead, whether through engagement, advocacy, or measured public statements, will likely shape not only immediate perceptions, but also broader debates about institutional legitimacy and the role of symbolic authority in modern governance. Economically, the unrest poses both immediate and potential long-term consequences. Urban centers affected by today's demonstrations have already reported disruptions to commerce, transport, and essential services, highlighting the vulnerability of city infrastructure to large-scale civic disturbances. Analysts warn that prolonged unrest could negatively impact investor confidence, retail activity, and regional economies, particularly in areas where repeated demonstrations exacerbate existing challenges in housing, employment, and public services. Additionally, the costs associated with law enforcement deployment, emergency response, and damage mitigation represent a tangible financial burden on local and national authorities. Economists emphasize that sustained unrest, if unaddressed, could amplify social inequality, reduce economic productivity, and place further pressure on government budgets, potentially necessitating targeted interventions, policy reform, or increased fiscal support for affected communities. This intersection of social grievance and economic consequence underscores the multifaceted nature of today's events, highlighting that civil unrest is not merely a matter of political optics, but a phenomenon with broad-reaching structural implications. Finally, the social and cultural implications of the unrest cannot be overstated. The events of today reflect not only immediate anger and frustration, but also broader societal dynamics, including generational divides, digital mobilization, and evolving expectations of civic engagement. Young people, in particular, have demonstrated the ability to coordinate, communicate, and influence public discourse at an unprecedented pace, leveraging social media and online networks to amplify their voices. At the same time, older generations, community organizations, and civic leaders are navigating how to reconcile traditional avenues of engagement with rapidly evolving public expectations. Experts highlight that the lessons of today's unrest may have enduring implications for governance, policymaking, and the relationship between citizens and institutions, emphasizing that meaningful dialogue, policy responsiveness, and the careful calibration of symbolic interventions will be essential to maintaining social cohesion in the months and years ahead. In conclusion, while the immediate focus remains on restoring calm and ensuring public safety, the ripple effects of this unrest are likely to influence Britain's political, economic, and cultural landscape for years to come, underscoring the profound challenges and opportunities facing government, monarchy, and society in navigating an era of heightened civic expectation, economic uncertainty, and rapid social change.